Hello, it's just my good self today. If you're a follower of the podcast, you've probably heard me mention the fact I was going to do a podcast on my experience on therapy, but I wanted to wait until I was out the other side of it and not during the midst of the brutalness, because believe me, some of it was grim, to say the least. So I feel like I'm at the stage where I can probably do a podcast episode with a camera in front of me as well, where I can maybe get through the full thing, talk about therapy, and not cry. That's my aim, because there's a limit to what I'm willing to share, and me crying through your laptop screen, phone screen, or through your radio in the car whilst you go to work is my limit. Now, I've got no sponsors for this show. I've not got a coaching offer to promote this week. All I ask is if you're listening on Spotify, just to give me a wee rating. We're up to 122. And if you're on YouTube, a wee like and subscribe would be bloody lovely, mate. Now, this podcast specifically is the most I've ever prepped for anything. Like, I've been putting it off for the last 3 days as well. There's a lot of shame that comes with going to therapy. And even just me recording this and talking about it, it does feel a bit embarrassing. So I want to try to be as honest as I can. I want to give you an insight into why I actually went and not lie about it, because that's half the problem with therapy as well, as people go and they don't actually speak about what they actually want to speak about or what they need help with, which is something I really try to force myself not to do. So I want to go into all of that and try to be as honest as I possibly can. So that's why I've split it into sections. You'll be able to skip to what section you want to go to. And just one thing I would like to preface this by saying, the whole point of me doing this is I feel like I'm at the point where I can be really, really honest about it. I'd done a lot of work on myself before I went to therapy, and I just feel like not many people will put themselves out there that have went through my situation. I think as a man struggling with their relationship with their mum, there's a massive stigma towards it. People saying mummy issues is the biggest red flag in relationship. There's just a massive thing in general, especially where I'm from, that you need to have this good relationship with your mum, and your mum basically gets this superiority above everyone, when at the end of the day, that's another human being and you can't pick your family. That's pretty much why I want to do this, because I know so many people that go through the same thing, and sometimes people around them don't really help the situation. That's why I want to do it. So without any more, jibber jabber, let's get into why I went to therapy. So in 2021, I was a year into PTing. So if you're new here, which I think some people will be, because I think just this title is going to get new people listening to the podcast, I'm a personal trainer. I started in 2020. Is that how you say it? 2020? I started then, and after like 6 months after the first lockdown, I just came home from Australia. I didn't really want to live in Glasgow at the time. I'm living in Glasgow again now. So I moved to London. Horrendous decision. I thought I could recreate my life in Australia, and you absolutely couldn't. I lived there for 9 months, and I hated 90% of it. I'm one of the most extroverted sort of people you'll meet, and I made no new mates apart from my flatmate, who I chose before I moved in with him, and I chose him because he was from Glasgow and he'd lived in Australia before, so we had quite a lot in common, and I'm still good friends with him today. His name's Josh. The reason I try to introduce him is because I've introduced him before to one of my friends, and I forgot his name. So his name's Josh. Anyway, I hated London. Really, really hated it. I spent a lot of time listening to audio books, walking about by myself. I'd say I spent 99% of my time by myself. Now, I was listening to this book called Lost Connections. A few people that have listened to the podcast have probably heard me mention this a good 5 to 10 times, but it's basically a book about why is there a surge in anxiety and depression. So it goes through this whole spiel at the start about like pharmaceutical companies making money off of like SSRIs and stuff like that. Bear in mind, I haven't read this book in like 2 years, so I can't really remember. So you can be skeptical about that. I was skeptical about all of that. I've had anxiety for a year before, but at this point, I'm not suffering from like depression or anxiety. I wasn't, even though I knew I had to leave London, I've had a rough patch of anxiety. So this was just a bit of like a bad decision moving to London, and my lifestyle wasn't great. There was no like depression or anxiety, but this book was talking about how like people are trying to make more money, things are becoming more materialistic, and this has taken us away from our tribes and making us go a lot more solo in pursuit of our dreams. And I had pretty much done that in London. I moved to one of the most populated city in the UK, and I spent the most time on my own I'd ever spent in my life. Anyway, after all of that in the book, it started coming to this point where they were talking about how most depression and anxiety is trauma responses. I might get the wording of all this wrong. Remember, I'm not a therapist. I'm a personal trainer that's probably read too many books and watched too many pop psychology TikToks, to be honest with you. That's just, there you go. There's my preface with that. If I say the wrong thing, it's fine, right? Get over it. So it was talking about childhood trauma, things resurfacing from your past, not dealing with them, and all of that sort of jazz. Now, I know that I didn't get on with my mum in my childhood, especially from like 9 onwards. Like, if you asked me how I felt about my mum when I was like 14, I wouldn't have had nice things to say. But a weird thing sort of happened where I was walking about listening to this book, and this was one of those books, I think it was maybe like 9 or 10 hours long as an audiobook, and as soon as I started listening to it, I would go on walks, and I'd finished it within 2 days because I was just like, I need to know this stuff. And when it was talking about childhood trauma, I started getting these vivid flashbacks. And now, again, I'm not going to cry, but I was crying my eyes out walking past the London Eye. I'm getting a flashback of me remembering my flashback, and it was grim. So I had this memory where, and I think I've spoke about this before, but this is the one that was like, oh shit. But so my mum and dad broke up when I was 4. My mum had met a guy when I was maybe 10, 11 or 12, can't remember which age. And the first time I met the guy, they'd been on a date, and she'd maybe already been dating him. They'd been out drinking, and they came back to the house, and I'm maybe in the living room or whatever. I think my big cousin was looking after me. I can't really remember who else was there, but he came in, and I don't know, I've maybe said something. I was quite cheeky when I was young, but I wouldn't have said anything to a brand new guy that my mum was dating. But he just came in and he screamed at me, called me fucking stupid or something. Can't remember, but there's swear words involved, and he was pointing at me and pointing down the way at me, like intimidating me, like steaming drunk, and proper, like, he's not hit me or anything, but borderline abuse, right? So after that, obviously I'm fucking 10. I'm absolutely terrified of the guy, and my mum promised me she would never see him again, like, which is fair enough. Compromised. Maybe he was sound until he drank, and then when he drank, he obviously lost the plot. So I was like, cool, right? Not seeing him again. This is my childhood, can't really remember it. Maybe a few months later, the time scales are going to be all over the place, right? So maybe a few months later, I'm playing football because all I'd done my full childhood was play football. I'd done nothing else. I would play other sports, but like football. In my head, I was going to be Celtic's #1 striker. I was going to be like the top scorer that ever played for Celtic. I was going to lift the Champions League, and people were going to be shouting my name, not Henrik Larsson's name. That was what I was going to become. Obviously, that didn't come to fruition. But anyway, I'm out playing football. I come back one day, and I chap on my front door, and nobody answers. Now, I used to live in a place called Straven. I've basically been a Lanarkshire slut. So if you know Glasgow, I've lived pretty much everywhere around Lanarkshire, like Hamel and Uddingston and all of this. So for a while, I lived in Straven, and we had this house that used to be part of the train station. So the only thing you could see at the front of the house was the front door. So we had a garage that went up the side of it. And this is by no means a big house rent, by the way. We lived on benefits. And the garage meant that there was no other windows, so you could only see in the front door, so you could only see in the hall, so you couldn't like look in the other windows. But what you could do is there was a spar and a car park behind it, and our garden was round the back, so I could walk round the main street, then walk into the car park, and just basically, I knew that there was a wee slit in our fence, and I could get through there, and then you could basically see in the whole house at the back. And sometimes we left the door open in the back of the house, and it was a full pane like window at the back, a full pane door at the back. So I come in the back and I look in the window, right? And this guy, his name's Stephen, by the way. I'll tell you his name because he's probably like fucking 65 now, but it's one of those memories that stuck in with me that if I ever see him again, you know what I'm going to say. Anyway, he's sitting on the couch and he sees me straight away. Like I knock on the thing. I've knocked before I even like look in. I see him there, and I've probably froze on the spot. My mum walks in with like food or a cup of tea or whatever it is. She sees me at the back door. She like then pretends she doesn't see me and shuts. There's like a curtain that went over like the door. I can't remember if you slid it to the side or whatever, but basically just shut the door. That shut the curtain in front of the door, and then shut the window that also looked into the living room, and pretended she couldn't hear me or see me. Right, okay? So that I hadn't thought about this probably since it had happened. And then I remember, see, this is the part where you do still struggle. So after that, I had to go, and I didn't like staying at other people's houses. I was like an only child and stuff, so I really didn't like staying at like my cousins and all that. Their houses were, there'd be like three siblings or four siblings. They all used to argue and all that, so I didn't like staying at other people's houses. I had to walk by myself at like 10 years old up to my auntie's house. At this point, you don't have phones or anything. I'm 10, no phones or that. I've had to walk up to my auntie's house by myself and be like, my mum's locked me out of the house and she has a fucking guy in there that's an arsehole. That was probably the way I spoke when I was like 10, to be fair. And I had to stay at my auntie's house. I remember not sleeping all night. I actually remember this. I genuinely remember it. And I remember having nightmares the full night. And like, fucking... It was fucking brutal. Anyway. So, that was the first sort of memory I had. And then, at that point, I wrote down... Cause I'd never... See, you actually can't talk about it without... Like, my eyes will water a bit, but... I won't even put the camera off, and I'll just, like... Because... a tear won't come down my face and then it'll go away and it's fine. This was the same thing happened when I had Aina on. So I went too deep, too quick, because we were just going to talk about therapy, and then I started speaking about something, and I was like, oh, and he was like, you're right, and I was like, oh, and I was like, fine, right, see, I'm over it. Like, don't get me wrong, I've cried in therapy. I cried when I first remembered that, but I don't want to sit and fucking like tears streaming down my face on a podcast. But like some stuff will just get you, like, and that's one of them for me. So I had wrote down at that point that I need to go for therapy, because it was like overwhelming, like the feelings, and I hadn't thought about it probably since it happened. And I just know that there's a few things like that there's probably loads that I can't remember as well, but I remember going for, see, after that happened, I wouldn't have spoke to my mum for like 2 weeks. Even at 10, I'd have blanked her existence for like 2 solid weeks, and I'd done that loads. So that's 2021. Fast forward to maybe 2 years later, because that's maybe early 2021. Can't remember the dates. Anyway, I've still not went for therapy. I remember that year, I think I inquired with like 3 people just on Google, and most of the therapists I seen didn't like the look of any of them. They looked, I'm not hippie. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm really not hippie. So as soon as I see that sort of like hippiness, I just know I wanted someone that I'm going to go on with, and I couldn't find any. And then the ones that looked quite good, none of them replied to me. So fast forward to a couple of years later, or a year and a half later, I'd just went back to Australia for the first time, which was overwhelming in a completely different sense. Again, the full time, I'm not really experiencing anxiety or depression again, or I didn't really have any depression at any point, but I've not experienced anxiety. I still want to go for therapy because of all of this, though. So I was overwhelmed by going back to Australia. Basically, when I first came home from Australia, again, I would call it low mood, but verging on being pretty depressive, because I moved to Australia and I loved it and I didn't want to come back, but I had to come back because I couldn't get another visa and COVID hit. So it took me a long time to go over it. And just as I got over it, I applied for I'd applied for a visa as I was still fucking in the midst of like being gutted about having to leave Australia. And when it came through, I was over it. So the visa was to get my second year reinstated, because they were giving people their visa back if they were there during COVID. So I then waited a full year to use that visa. So I applied for it when I was in London, and then when I moved back to Glasgow, and I was like, maybe I'll just settle down in Glasgow. I was like, I'm quite liking Glasgow. I got that visa. I was like, fuck, now I'm going to want to go back to Australia. So I went back to Australia. I told everyone I was going to go back for 2 weeks. And after like 2 hours of being there, I was like, I don't want to leave. And then that brought up all of these emotions, like having to tell my dad and that I didn't want to leave, which was really hard. So I was coming back from Perth, and I'd pretty much, at this point, I'd been back for like 10 days. I'd been Melbourne, Sydney, seen all my mates, went to Perth, met a bunch of new people, and then I was on the plane back, and I was going through all of those emotions, and then I was like, that on top of the whole thing I knew I needed to go address with like relationships and my mum. I was like, I'd wrote down, because it was New Year's Eve, my flight had got delayed 10 hours, and I was having to bring in the bells like New Year's by myself on a plane. So I had a notepad. I was writing down things for 2023 that I wanted to do. One of them was not drinking. The other one was therapy. And I swear, as soon as I wrote down I wanted to do therapy, the woman next to me started speaking to me, because everyone was kind of speaking because of the nature of being on a delayed flight where you were going to bring in New Year with the person next to you. And she was a therapist. Her name was Naomi. I spoke to her for about 2.5 hours. We had so much in common, because as a personal trainer, a lot of my job, it involves loads of similar stuff. Like, you could argue that most people that want to lose weight would benefit just as much from going to therapy. A lot of the things I've had to learn are like things that therapists teach. It's just obviously not the same thing. I'm not like, here, you got anxiety, come to personal training. But like, lots of things interlink. So we spoke for ages, and I was like, I asked her for her number and all that, and she was going back to Melbourne where I was going to stay, but she was miles away from me. So I didn't actually choose her as my therapist because it just wouldn't have worked out. But the voice that anyone who listens to my podcasts that you hear in the background of a guy called Paul, who is the producer of the podcast I do if I ever do it in Glasgow. So if you see a green background, Paul's the producer in there. If you hear a really Glaswegian accent of a guy talking in the background, that was my therapist. And so he has a studio that he also does therapy out of. He's so sound. He's like just a proper Glaswegian big Celtic fan, which is all green flags for me. And I would never do any blue flags. So I just had loads in common with him. So I just reached out to him. I was like, here, are we at the point where we're not good enough mates for me to do therapy with you? And he was like, I think we're just at the point where we could do therapy. If I knew him any more, I don't think I could have done it, but we were just at the point. So Paul then became my therapist. And just before we go into the next section of the shame, because I know this has been a long section, but I knew what I needed to go to therapy for, which I think is important. And my problems had cropped up a lot in relationships, or not even relationships, just seeing people. Like the first relationship I had, I got really bad anxiety. So it was a combination of like who I was choosing and also just like how my brain worked from. It's basically, imagine you've got a big wound from childhood that you don't even really know you have until you get exposed to things that can basically make it's like putting acid on the wound. And unless, like, I feel like if I never got into any relationships or like developed feelings for people, I wouldn't know about any of this. And I think the first girlfriend I had, like, that could have been anyone. I think, like, as in how I suffered from it, I think that as soon as she was probably the first person that I properly had feelings for, I think that could have been anyone, and this would have happened to me. So I knew what the problem was, and I just didn't know how to fix it. That's pretty much why I went to therapy. I knew what I was doing. So the shame of going to therapy, this is probably why I never went for so long. Like, I applied for therapists. If I really wanted to try get one, I could have. And it's not that I didn't want one, it's that I probably didn't want to face what it was. It's the same reason that people will inquire with me for PTing multiple times and never do it, because they don't want to actually face it. They can change it, same way I'm changing this. Like, I wouldn't say I have changed, but I'm in a million times better place than before I started therapy. So there was a whole just process of me going, I need to go, not suffering day to day. I want to keep emphasizing that it wasn't like it got so bad I went to therapy. It was like everything else in my life was going well, but I felt like I wasn't capable of like dating and choosing the right person, or even if I did choose the right person, knowing how my brain works in order to be able to deal with navigating a relationship and maintaining one. I just didn't feel like I was capable of doing it. Like, genuinely, and I know that's like a self-defeating belief in itself, but I don't think there was a way around doing this without getting help. Do you know what I mean? Like, I knew what the problem was, but I was like, right, the problem is my relationship with my mum, probably. How do I fix that? I don't know how my brain works. I don't know how to, like, what exercises, is it even exercises you do? What do you do? I don't know. So there was a long time of me just putting off that sort of way. Also, just as a man, right? So I think this is a hypothesis, right? What a big word, by the way. But I think a lot of men's struggles is to do with, like, they want some sort of, like, attention, or they want to be able to have a good relationship, attract a woman that they like. And if they struggle to do that, or they can't see any way of them being able to do that, I think that's where, like, when you see these people that are genuinely, right, this is what I'm going to compare it to, but when you see some of the traumatic things like men have done, you see that after it, like, they might be part of like that incel movement and stuff, right? So not to toot my own horn, but I didn't have any problem getting a date. I didn't have any problem with, like, if I'm in a bar, I don't feel unattractive. I know I'm not unattractive. I don't feel unconfident when I'm speaking to women. I know I've got better chat than most cunts. No offense to them, but that's not it. It's more, as soon as it gets to the point where I have to be vulnerable, that's what I didn't feel like I had. And so, like, even though women think men just want to like shag around or whatever, maybe especially when you're younger, you do. But at some point, a man will shack up with a woman and want to do it if he thinks it's the right person. And I thought if I got to that stage, I would do something to fuck it up, and not because I want to do that, and not even in the sense that I would like run away. Just the anxiety that I got from that first relationship, and it was during it as well, the overthinking that I sort of went through in that first one. Now, that's never happened to me anywhere near that extreme again, but it just sort of like, this is what I mean. This is why I'm trying to be so honest, because I'm like, that's too much to say. And I even think to myself, what if I start dating and the person that I'm dating listens to this and then goes, fuck, he's a red flag? This is what I mean, right? This is why I'm trying to be honest, because that's where all this shame stems from. So what I just said, I think, might actually be the most important part of the podcast, because the full time that I was doing this, I was like, right, actually say when you go to therapy what it is, because that's the issue. Don't beat around the bush, because you won't ever fix it if you don't tell them what's actually going on. And what's actually going on is the most shameful thing that I think can come out my mouth, is that I think I probably have some sort of trust issue that I've wrapped up in another fancier way. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like, I would have never said to anyone I've got trust issues, because I didn't think I had. But then when you look at it all, I'm like, that's trust issues though, innit? Like, every sort of person I've maybe been seeing or been in a relationship with since the first relationship I had was people I didn't want to really be with, and people that I've maybe mistaken their obsession with love. So when I've been with them, they've been so like obsessed that I've felt so comfortable, when actually it's not. Like, it's their insecurities that's like showing up as what I've perceived as love. Now, that's a two-way street. That doesn't mean, oh, I wasn't invested in it. I'm getting into that because of my own insecurities, because I need that much like obsessiveness. And I'm not really like that, but I need that, or I did need that to feel like less vulnerable. Does that make sense? Fuck, that's honest, innit? But if I look, or also that I was in situations where I felt like I could take it or leave it as well. So I was avoiding getting into things where I did have more intense feelings. And I would say that's been since I was, 22 now? So I had a girlfriend for 6 months, and that was pretty much everything I just described. And I've been seeing people, and it's been like I've not been that bothered about it. So I haven't mentally struggled, but I've avoided things like the plague. So you could say I've went from like anxiously attached to avoidant, but I don't think that's an actual thing. So there's attachment theories. We went through this in therapy. But I think Paul described it as potentially being avoidantly anxious. So like you have an anxious attachment, but you're just avoiding ever putting yourself in those situations. I think because after my first breakup, it was that fucking horrific. I had anxiety for the last month of it. Then I broke up with her purely because that's what it was doing to me, and like things were happening. So it was again, honest. I think she was gonna probably break up with me. She was doing things that were making me anxious. Plus, my thoughts were like that, and it wasn't like I've broke up with her, if you know what I mean. I've done it for my own sanity, not because I wasn't like in love with her, because I was. So a year of trying, not even knowing what anxiety was at the start, and then knowing what it was and being like, I can't get out of this. I don't know how to get out of this. Couldn't sleep. I don't think I slept for like 2 months. Just, I would have, as someone that can talk away to anyone, I would go like parties and I would freeze. I wouldn't be able to speak to people, and I'd be like, what the fuck is wrong with me? And I started getting myself back when I went traveling and all that, and I started like, I know I'm fine if somebody says something to me and like I say like a joke or I take the piss out of them and it comes to me quick, I'm like, right, okay, I'm fine, because that's my natural, like, that's my set point. That's why I'm like, I'll take the piss all the time, like all the time. And if I'm not like that, there's usually something going on. But again, not felt anything like that in a while. But that's pretty much, I don't think I can be any more honest than that. And if I was, I'd maybe start crying. But yeah, I think a lot of men, and you don't need to be capable of being that honest. That's why I'm trying to do it, because that it's just more, there's a lot of fucking stigma and like so many, all these icks that girls come out with and red flags, like guy doesn't get on with his mum and all that. Like, I think as a man, you're like, okay, I need to keep my cards to myself and not to anyone. And I think that's part of the problem. And I think a lot of it stems from relationships and like the desire to be loved by a woman, probably, which I don't think a lot of women understand. And I think that's what I want to put out there. So yeah, that's the shame. So what did my first few sessions look like? Well, it was actually over Zoom, because I was in Australia and Paul is in Glasgow. Now, I would have much preferred to do it in person, but I also, do you know what? Because I was in Australia, I think I would have wanted to do it with someone Scottish as well. I think in Glasgow, see, because like all my grandparents, 3 out of 4 of them, alcoholics. The 4th one, just an arsehole. She hasn't seen me since I was 8. She stopped speaking to pretty much, don't know why this is coming out, but she stopped speaking to like me and all my cousins and all that when I was like maybe 9, and I was like her favourite grandchild, right? So even after she stopped speaking to all of us, she still sent me birthday cards and Christmas cards. Like, she didn't send all my cousins them. So I would get like, I don't know, 20 quid every Christmas and birthday, and all my cousins would be like, why are you still getting them? And she's done it for ages, and I reckon she still sends them just to the wrong address. But she tried to add me on Facebook when I was 23 in Australia, and she tried to do it 3 times, and I kept declining her. And then when I came back, my mum was like, yeah, your gran wants to go for dinner, us free. And my mum's issues stem from her mum, and my issues stem from my mum. And my gran I haven't seen in 20 years. I was like, I would honestly rather gouge my eyeballs out than go for that dinner. So a lot of, like, coming from council estates in Glasgow, if you've not got an alcoholic grandparent or something, I don't know how, where have you managed that? How have you managed that? So, like, I wanted to be with someone from Glasgow because, like, we all have fucking trauma. All of us. We're fucked up cunts. That's why we're fucking mental. That's why we've all lost the plot. So I wanted to be with someone that will understand. So it was over Zoom. First few sessions, right? So I think the first 2, bear in mind, see, like I said, like, if you meet me, I'm not shy. I'm not unconfident. I'll take the piss and all that. I'm also not like the loudest in the room. I think some people maybe that have met me might think he's going to be loud. I'm not loud, but you wouldn't call me shy. And like, I don't struggle in the women department in terms of, like, I don't think I'm unattractive. I'm maybe unattractive when I'm 95 kilos. I've dropped like 4, right? My jawline's coming back. And so when I bulk, I definitely lose my confidence a wee bit. But then when I come back down, I'm fine. So like, he doesn't know what I'm gonna. Because he's listened to me in podcasts and he's heard me speak about my mum. He might have a fair idea, but those sort of issues can come out in different ways. So the first few sessions of the therapy over Zoom, which was still pretty fine, by the way, because I already knew Paul, it was still fine. Connection issues and that every now and then, but it was fine. And so he's at, like, it was just like, what's your relationship? What's your relationship like with your mum and your dad, going through that? Then maybe we touched on girlfriends and stuff, but he was also asking me why do you want to come? And I was sort of like, I did beat around the bush sometimes. I was like, oh, I'm thinking about maybe moving to Australia. I'm a bit overwhelmed with all of that. And I was like, maybe one of my only options of staying in Australia is getting a girlfriend. I don't think I'm capable of that. I beat around the bush a little bit, but then he would like prod me. And Paul's really, really good at his job as well. I would like to emphasise that. Just like if you get a shit personal trainer, there's an onus of that is on you. Paul's not expensive, but like if you go for a cheap PT, you get a shit PT. And if you don't do any research into your therapist, you probably get a shit one. It's just a human at the end of the day with a qualification. Therapists are more qualified than PTs, right enough. But anyway, he's asking me stuff, and he's like, because he actually has a background, and he said this on podcast where he was a sex addict. So he's like asking me things because he's had similar upbringing and going, is it an ego thing? Like, do you maybe like maybe get with women and then never talk to them again, that sort of thing? And I was like, no, that's not what it is. If anything, it's the opposite. Like, I don't know how to make myself vulnerable. If anything, it's not an ego thing, or like it's an insecurity thing. Do you get what I mean? So it's not like, oh, he's thinking of the problem like, oh, he's a shagger. Nah, it's not that. I'm not a fucking absolute shagger. I've had my spells, okay? Sue me. But I don't drink anymore than that. I'm not out in the town. I don't go on ridiculous amounts of dates with the intention of sleeping with women or anything like that. I'm fucking 28, mate. So I was like, no, that's not it. Get insecurities about getting in relationships. I don't feel like I can sustain them. And I've had periods where, like, I just get this, it's like a vroom down me, where I just get anxious and start getting in these thought loop patterns. And sometimes maybe it's because I've chose someone and they're doing things, which is also like that you need to get to the root of why you're choosing them. But sometimes I reckon people have not done stuff and just like a default. And the way I would describe it is like, it's like switching on a switch, and it's like vroom all the way down me, and I'm like on edge. And then when I'm in that state, other things can set me off that are nothing to do with that. And it's not anger or anything like that. It's like, I don't know, nervousness. And like, it showed up, and when I went to parties, people tried to speak to me and I couldn't get my words out and stuff. And I said, no, nothing like that had ever happened to me. And like, after that first one, if I'd felt that come up again, I would just remove myself from that. I'd be like, oh, well, that person's toxic. No, I have issues. I should be able to control that somewhat. So I go, oh, fuck, there must be something that they're doing. No, I also have issues. So I was like, this is what it is. I kept, like, I wouldn't say it straight away, like, mate, I've got trust issues. I would be like, nah, that's not what it is. And he'd be like, yeah, listen, if I say something and make an assumption, if you feel like that's not what it is, definitely push back on me. I'm not actually trying to put words in your mouth. I'm trying to just, navigate things, because he's basically feeling me out, and I'm making sure that I'm not sending them in the wrong direction. So that was what the first few sessions were sort of like. And it was just a case of sort of looking for trends maybe in my relationships. Then I think maybe like a few sessions in, also because I'd asked like, see if I'm going on, like if I go on dates or whatever, because I was also gonna start dating again, because for like 2 years I had went on dates, right? And I had like, since I started my business, there was like 4 months where I was seeing someone and stuff. But I hadn't really put myself out there properly because I'd spent so long building this business. Like, genuinely, I still struggle to have time for stuff, but at the very beginning of it, I had no time for anything else at all. So it'd been a while. So I was like, I want to like start dating at the same time. I was like, see if I get this feeling, like, what do I do? And he gave me like, is it NSDR meditation? So it's like non-sleep deep rest. Like 6 minutes, like a YouTube video that you do, and it's just like focused on your breathing. It's not actually as woo-woo as it sounds. And then he was like, this is, I like, cause I know Paul as well, I laughed at him. He was like, right, we're gonna do cold showers. And I was like, oh yeah, cool. See if someone breaks up with me, well, just get in the shower, I'll be fine. But I was, at the same time, I was like, I'm gonna do everything that he asked me to do. Like, see, every exercise he gave me or everything he asked me to do, I did do it, apart from like one time. So cold showers in the morning, which I'm still doing. They're a lot easier now. And I think it's not like this doesn't fix things, by the way. This doesn't mean that you don't have to speak about anything. It was just sort of more building up a bit more resilience. So like, there's a fine line between you using that to just like cover up your feelings, and then there's like building up resilience. Like, it's more the idea, if you get in a cold shower every morning, then if something bad happens, you've got more, like, you can deal with it more. And it's like a tiny, tiny, tiny piece of the puzzle. But I didn't mind it. Like, as in, I wasn't like, no, I'm not doing that. I was like, fuck it, yeah, let's go for it. Let's do that. And then what? He didn't really have me do anything else. And then like the first kind of session, like, I didn't really cry. Like, he's just feeling me out. Like, nothing's come up yet. And then like one time he was like, right, let's go through your first breakup with your first girlfriend. And he's like, what we're gonna do is and he didn't tell me this before the session. He was like, imagine a big ball of cotton wool. What we're gonna do is take one thread out of the big ball of cotton wool, and we're gonna evaluate the full thread and take a deep look at this piece of thread, which is the breakup. And I was like, do we need to though? Like, do we need to do that? How about we just leave the ball? Let's put the ball in the drawer. Let's put that ball back in the drawer where it's been for a long, long time. You know? I don't think we need to look at the thread. You know, I know what's in the thread. The thread count is 2,000. That's what's in the thread. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, nah. So he sprung that on me, and that was so that first breakup, like, I definitely didn't like avoid my feelings, man. I fucking felt my feelings too much, if you know what I mean. I didn't like journaling that through it, and I probably, like, I got over it. Took a long time, but I did go over it. But I probably just, like, cause you're not getting any help, I've like fucking got a big wound and I've just plastered it up myself. But I definitely didn't do what a lot of people do, where they just throw themselves into something, they think they're fine, and then like 2 years later it all resurfaces. That didn't really happen. Like, I did fucking, like, you know, I mean, I cried, like, it was shite. I didn't like not, but the anxiousness I had was like fault loop patterns. So I would like just replay stuff that had happened in the relationship, and I'd maybe look for things that maybe I always felt like, what have I done that's put them off? And I would fault loop pattern that, as in, like, I would fixate on one specific thing that had happened, and I would just think about that all day. And then like the next day I might wake up, think about that all day in a state of anxiety. By the way, this is like 5-6 years ago. This isn't recent. But this just gives you more insight into, bloody camera went off, right? So I think I'm going to zone out most of this podcast and forget everything that's came out of my mouth. But I was pretty much talking about how I dealt with that breakup, wasn't I? Like, my feelings and the anxiety and all that. But even though I felt the feelings, like, all I can described getting over that breakup was like, just like it faded over time, like for a year, like a lot too long. It was the forefront of my mind, and then it just faded. That I thought about it less and less and less. Now, like obviously, long time ago, so 2, 3, 4 years or whatever, where like just like anyone, I don't know if this happens to anyone, but say I've got like 3 or 4 sort of like either an ex or just someone you've seen, they'll crop up. Like one of the 4 will crop up in like one of my dreams every 3 months. And I have dreams, like, because I've stopped drinking this year, I'm getting nightmares about me drinking. So my nightmares right now are me getting on the session, on the gear, waking up and going, shit, I'm meant to be off drink for a year, and I've got a 10 grand bet with my mate that I absolutely can't lose because I don't have 10 grand to give him. I don't have 1 grand to give him. So even though I'd dealt with the feelings, the thought of like going through my actual breakup and like the thoughts that were going through my head, the fried things that I was telling myself, do you know what I mean? I was never, so like every breakup I've had, I've never been one for like, I wouldn't contact them or anything, or I wouldn't be fucking like on their Instagram or like stalking stuff or like messaging them, get back with me or anything. I haven't done anything like that. But more the internal thoughts were horrific, and like self-deprecating stuff was horrific. So that's like, I knew I was going to have to tell them stuff like that, and I was like, don't want to do that. Pretty much. It's like, nah. How about no? How about we skipped in a good part, which is just, fucking not this. So anyway, we do that, and that was the first sort of like time that we'd done like an exercise. So I think, I'm not sure, again, not a therapist, don't know what I'm talking about. I think this was the first sort of part that was like CBT, and we were like breaking down my beliefs. So like he was asking me stuff that was like, maybe like, what was your actual thoughts? And I was like, I'm never going to find someone that I like again. And I would be like, I'm always going to put people off. Or I also felt like I couldn't be vulnerable with a girl. I felt like that would put them off. So see what I'm doing just now? I felt like if I ever done that with a girl, they automatically wouldn't like me. And, that's the sort of stuff that was coming up. So what he was getting me to do was, I think we were like reframing those thoughts so that there's like a positive to it, which sounds fucked up, but it actually really helps. Because there's traits that I've got that part of it I really like as in I'm very self-reliant. I trust myself a lot. You know what I mean? Like, got my own business. There's loads of positives to it. Like, I'm not, see if I have a job, when I've had a job and I've quit, I've backed myself so much to build my own business and stuff. And I believe in my ability and those sort of things. So a lot of those traits have been positive for me as well. And then it was just like, where are these like all or nothing thinking? And most of them were. So you had to like tick 10 different self-limiting beliefs that these fall into. And that was one of the first exercises I remember doing. And then we went through like, this is still in some of my earlier sessions, we went through like some of my maybe some of my other relationships. And he got me to do like a relationship journal, and it was really just my mum, my first girlfriend and my second girlfriend. I'm not naming any of these people or that, by the way. They're never gonna see it. I don't speak to them anymore. I didn't like have a bad breakup with the first one. And we spoke a bit after, not loads. And we met up a few times and stuff. Bad idea. Not a good idea. Just weird, to be honest. It wasn't like traumatizing like the breakup. It's just strange. Don't do it. And then the second one I never spoke to again. Ever. Blocked her and everything. It had to be done. But yeah. So when we done this relationship journal with my mum, my two ex-girlfriends, we were looking at everything, and he was like, mate, this all stems from your mum. So when we look through your relationship journal with the two girlfriends you've had, all we're going to do is really look for trends and how this relationship, your mum, has filtered into your relationships and your adulthood. Because he was like, this is all stemming from your mum. So I knew this. I knew that was the issue. But this gave me the sort of like, I was like, right, now we can actually tackle that. So yeah, that was the first few sessions. Okay, so my relationship with my mum. Right, this is the one where I was like, you won't cry in this. And I was read that this was the next bit. I was like, oh. Because this is the one where the odd word comes out of my mouth and I'm like, shit. My eyes might water. Because it's difficult, because even all of this, right, I still feel really bad for my mum. Like, I find it hard not to feel bad for her. But at the same time, how bad I felt for my mum was part of the issue that I had to address as well. Like the guilt associated with it. Because a lot of children, when they're kids, will sort of like blame themselves for what their parent is either doing to them or just how they are in general. Which is really hard to break down when you're an adult, because you don't remember it that well. And half my battle with going through my relationship with my mum during therapy was trying to fucking remember it. I just know it wasn't good. I just know from like 10 to 18, just to be brutally honest, I fucking hated her. Like, I actually hated her. I couldn't spend more than 5 minutes talking to her. I don't know how much it's good to really just maybe fire in a few stories that I can remember as well, because it's probably best to do it like that. Because when Paul was asking me stuff, I was like, mate, I just know it was bad. I can't really remember. So like, I'll tell you what I'd done. I knew she'd been, so in fact, start here, right? So even in my 20s, right, my mum, just to let you understand why I'd feel so bad for her and stuff, and why this is so hard. So my mum got diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis maybe when I was like 14, which I think, don't quote me again, but from listening to really high up therapists, they sort of understand rheumatoid arthritis as being like more of a trauma response now, like a physical trauma response. Again, probably 99% of you wouldn't have ever heard that before. This guy called Gavin, I heard say it, but remember, I've researched that and schizophrenia a lot, because those are two things. One, rheumatoid arthritis, my mum definitely has. Schizophrenia is what I think she has or has developed. So like in my early 20s, my mum's had psychotic episodes. I moved in with my dad when I was 18, by the way, just for reference. She's had psychotic episodes where she's phoned me at like, and I've spoke about this a lot on podcasts, she's phoned me at like 4 a.m, telling me that people with pink hair are chasing her, and she believes that I'm the one. She's called me like a puppet master. She thinks I get people with pink hair, and I'm like in the sky, and I'm like getting people with pink hair to follow her about. Now, I'm not doing that. Okay? Nah, it's not what I do. It's not what I spend my time doing. But when she's had those episodes, so this is the first one, and obviously you're like 21. I'm like 20. I was 20 actually. So I had no knowledge of mental health at 20. Hadn't experienced anything myself. It was 22 when that first breakup happened. I got anxiety, and then naturally when you have anxiety, that's why you know when someone hasn't went through anything, because the way they speak, you know instantly. Like if you speak about anxiety or depression, they say something, you can go by their tone. You're like, okay, you don't have a fucking clue. You don't even speak about it, because just by your tone, I know you don't know anything. Anyway, So I had no idea what was going on. So I went up to see her because I was scared she was going to kill herself. I knew something was I knew something mental was happening. Thought she was going to kill herself. So I stayed there for 4 days. I remember the first time I told my first girlfriend about this, and it was the first time I cried in front of a girl, and I was like, actually fucking traumatized even telling her. And she spent like 4 days telling me that like people are coming to the house following her, that all of this, like she goes to Sainsbury's and people are following her everywhere, and everyone's bitching about her. And her eyes looked fucking mental. She looked as if she'd actually not slept in like 3 years, and she looked like deranged. She looked like a crazy cat lady. She was pointing at me, telling me I was the one that had done it. I didn't sleep for 4 days because I was so scared she was going to like fucking kill me in the middle of the night, or set the house on fire, or come at me with a knife, because she thought, like, remember, I'm like a bad person in this. So I was fucking terrified for 4 days. And then I broke down in front of her, and she like switched and came out of it. She was like, I'm so sorry about all of that. And it was as if she seen sense as soon as she started crying, or as soon as I started crying. I also smashed her phone, I think. Well, me smashing her phone is one of those things that I can't remember if I wanted to do that or if I did do it. Because she was on the phone. She had a friend who later became her girlfriend because she came out as gay after. Again, that was weird at 55. Anyway, she had her friend on the phone who was probably her girlfriend at the time, but I never knew. And the woman on the phone has also got mental issues. It's also probably why I never realised that they were together, because I tried to stay so far away from it, because it was like an episode of Jeremy Kyle every time I fucking heard anything about it. And she was like, look, she's on the phone telling you people with pink hair are following her as well. And I can't remember if I smashed the phone. It was that much I hazed, do you know what I mean? Like, I can't remember if I wanted to smash it or I did smash it. I know I took it off her anyway, because I just lost it, and then that's where I started crying. So stuff like that's happened. She's got a terrible relationship with her mum. Told you about that already. And just like the first time I came back from Australia, I hadn't seen her in 2 years. I hadn't seen my dad in 2 years as well, by the way. I didn't come back because I couldn't afford it, and no one came out really to see me. And after I hadn't seen her for 2 years in Australia, she looked like she'd aged like 10 years because of the rheumatoid arthritis. And she's just, in general, always struggled with her mental health in general. So that's why a lot of the guilt and stuff I have from it. So I can't really remember stuff that much. And remember, I'm telling you everything, but one thing that, especially if there's a guy listening to this that maybe has similar things with our mum, mums get protected so much, right? My mum took me away from my dad when I was like 4 and didn't let him see me for like 2 months. The first time my dad came and picked me up, I think she finally let him see me for like an hour or two at her house, and he crashed his car because he was he crashed his car because he was that upset. Fuck, I knew that would happen again. So like, mums get protected so much. But see, that's what I didn't want, man. Right, so you'd probably have to wait 20 seconds and then that'll go away. But like, that's fine. So my dad's the biggest fucking legend on the whole planet. He came at every single football game I ever played. Like, ever. Like, every single one. So like, I should have been brought up by my dad, but the mum gets the priority. And then also, like, if the son doesn't go on with the mum, the son, like, people always are like, the son's a prick. Do you know what I mean? And like, any time I've struggled with my relationship with my mum, I get so much, like, by mates or like family. I've even had arguments with my dad where it's like, you need to see your mum and all this. It's like, yeah, it's just, for example, like, cause my dad's like he is a legend, but even when he said it to me, I'm like, why did you and my mum break up? And he'd be like, well, if I said white, your mum would say black just to fucking cause shit. And I'd be like, okay, so I lived with her since I was 4 till I was 18, just me and her in a house. Do you think she didn't do that to me when I was fucking 5? Obviously she did. So, oh man, fuck, I didn't want to fucking, bastard. Anyway, so if I go through stories, I'll be able to say these ones without crying, just to give you some insights. First of all, I didn't remember a lot of these stories until I started going through because he was like, tell me some things that have happened with your mum, or just like, until the next session, just try to remember stuff and write it all down. And I was like, I can't remember it. And so I remembered her. She used to just be a fucking arsehole to me on Facebook sometimes when I moved to Australia, and before that. I was like, right, I remember her doing that to me, so I'll go look through the way she was speaking to me. So in like 2018 or whatever, so this is like 5 years ago, my mum just randomly messaged me on Facebook saying, celebrating Brexit tonight, hope you are too, and sent me like this link to something about, I don't know, whatever, I can't remember, right? So I don't care about politics. The last thing I voted in was Brexit, and like the other thing I voted in was independence. I'm really not political. I hate talking about politics. I probably, no offense to anyone, and if you don't agree with me, I don't give a fuck. I just don't want to vote anymore. I don't want to talk about politics. I hate talking about politics. People just want to debate with you about shit. But like Brexit was probably the only, and I was quite passionate about it then because I was young, and I voted against Brexit. My mum knew that I was quite passionate about that at the time, and also knew that I voted against it. And also my mum has no idea about politics. She doesn't have a fucking clue about any of it. I'm almost a million. I would bet you 100 grand that my mum did not vote in Brexit. She doesn't have any knowledge on any of it. So she sends me this link, and I'm like, you didn't vote Brexit? And she was like, how would you know? And that's, bear in mind, I'm on the other side of the world from my mum, and this is like just the messages she sent me. And I was like, can you just stop, like, see you later? And she would like send me, she would just keep sending me these links to like whatever, these articles about people talking about Brexit. She's writing a conspiracy theories. Again, some of this is maybe the schizophrenia, and then some of it is just my mum. So she was sending me links, and I'm like, fuck off. Like, actually fuck off. You just, all you want to do is piss me off. That's all you want to do here. I don't care about Brexit. I was like, I only care about the fact all you want to do is just annoy me. And then she would be like, this is typical you. You're such a smart boy, but you've got such anger issues just like your dad. And see, when I read that back, I was like, that's what she always done to me. I was like, that's literally what she always done to me. She would like specifically do something to piss me off and then just gaslight the fuck out of me. So I then would remember other things. I might have told this one on the podcast. I won't think how much I wanted to play football. The first game of the season, you had to get your parent or guardian to sign a contract. I feel like I have told this. And yeah, I told it on the Aina one where, by the way, if you listen to this, listen to that one, because it's just nice that there's two of us really being open about it. So I'll quickly tell this. Football contract, needed my parent or guardian to sign it. My mum, obviously I lived with her. My dad lived like half an hour drive away. 14, I can't fucking drive to my dad and get him to sign it. So I come in, I'm like, can you sign this for me playing on Sunday? By the way, we aren't like arguing 24/7. Like, it's not 24/7. And I also can't really remember what it was like day to day. I was definitely an arsehole to her sometimes, but I just honestly, I remember I couldn't even sit with her for 5 minutes. Like, and if she spoke to me for longer than 10 minutes, she would just start doing stuff to annoy me. I just couldn't. I would play Xbox or play football. Like, I couldn't deal with it. And then I'm like, can you sign this contract? And she's like, I'll sign it on Sunday. And I'm like, can you I just need your signature so I can play on Sunday. She's like, I'll do it on Sunday. And I say this is Wednesday after training. I'm like, why can't you do it now? She's like, I'll sign it on Sunday. And I'm like, right. And I come down on Thursday and be like, can you sign it? And she'd be like, sign it on Sunday. I'm like, why the fuck is she not signing it? And then Sunday would come and I kept on leaving it on like the mantelpiece. I actually remember this. And whatever, I'm like 14, 15. I leave it on the mantelpiece. It comes to Sunday. And I've maybe spent 3 days asking her to sign this fucking stupid contract so I can play on Sunday. And then Sunday comes down to games that morning and I'm like, can you sign it? And I was like, can't really remember the full thing, but the contract wasn't on the mantelpiece that I'd left it on. And she was sitting there and I was like, where's the contract? And she was like, what contract? And I was like, the contract I've asked you to sign for 4 days so I can play on Sunday. And she was like, I don't really know what you're talking about. And I'd be like, you do though? And she'd be like, Gavin, this is stuff she used to say to me as well that Paul really had to push back on me, because this is the stuff that I would sort of believe, and this is where I'd make excuses for her. I'd be like, Gavin, my mental health's that bad, I just don't remember stuff. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't remember stuff like that. And I would just see red. I would fucking lose the plot. Like, I would just like, and like, there was no violence in the house. I hope that's pretty clear from just the way I speak and stuff. By losing the plot, I mean I would tell her I fucking hate her. And then I think the main thing I would do is like, I wouldn't speak to her for like 2 weeks. Like, she'd come up and be like, oh, do you want dinner? I'd be like, don't ever speak to me ever again. I think that, I can't remember, but that's the sort of thing that's how the conversations would go. So I remember the family next door to us, you could always hear them like slamming doors, screaming at each other. Mine would be more like, don't even ever speak to me ever again. And her making out as if I'd done, like, was like I was being unreasonable. Other things I remember, at 8 years old, and by the way, I this popped into my head the other day as well. I remember always being really like this kind of the smartest kid in school till I was about 10, right? See, from 5 till 10. And I actually remember what the other boy's name was, Adam, and he moved to New Zealand. But I always remember me and him being put together, and or like being a competition, me and him like being the smartest. And until I got to like 10, and then I remember not being able to concentrate and stuff in school. And I remember that's been when my mum was starting to like really fucking do stuff to me all the time, like just to piss me off. So at 8 years old, I remember getting taken to therapy. And at 8, I don't think there was a single, I was a fucking little blonde, smart kid. My dad was really good to me. And then I got took to therapy at 8. I remember being in Hamilton and being like, I think I spoke to someone recently and they were telling me about this place they went to in Hamilton. I was like, I think that's the place I got took to. So I got took to therapy when I was like 8. Don't know what happened with that. Can't really remember. But I remember being there and going, why am I speaking to this man? Why am I here? And then at 13, I got took to therapy again for my apparent anger issues. And I remember this person definitely wasn't qualified. It was in a council house in Hamilton I get took to. And the woman, my mum is right into crystals and astrology. If you ever wonder why I slag off all of that quite a lot, just go and meet my mum and you'll see why. So there's maybe a few stories here. I don't know if everyone wants to hear these stories, right? But I just want to, because I know there's such a like, protect your mum, like the mum, like do everything for your mum. What give you fucking like, real insights into like why that's been so toxic for me to hear all this time. So 13, took to this woman who's crystals everywhere, not qualified therapist. I'm not one to go to therapy. I just should probably at this point be living with my dad. Simple. Anyway, I go in there. As soon as she starts this woo-woo chat that my mum does, I was like, fuck off. Get me out of here. And then I walked out, and I remember her chasing me down the street, and her shouting at my mum, that boy is troubled. And my mum like speaking to her going, I know he's troubled and all that, and me just sitting there like, and even though I knew they were fucked, both of those women, I was like, no, yous are fucked. And I remember even at 13, I'm like, no, yous are the ones that are fucked. But it's not. I'm actually lucky that I could see that at the time. But it still didn't stop the effects and the trust issues that I gathered from it. Other things that had happened. So when I was really young, she made me terrified of my dad. I'm like 4. She made it out like my dad was this big bad person. And then the other things she would do is when she was doing something to annoy me, she would then, if I got annoyed, which was her goal, she would then cause my mum, like my dad couldn't even spend 10 seconds with my mum after the breakup. Like he would come, he would have his van, he'd pick me up, he would wait outside and beep his horn, and he wouldn't even come in. He couldn't even handle a second of my mum. And that's very much what I'm like. And I've forced myself to like endure 2 hours of it all through my 20s for her sake, not for my own sake, for her sake and for everyone around me who has pushed me to do that. So as my dad's had that relationship with her, and like it was very easy for her at the start to be like, look, your dad's this big bad man. So I was scared of him until I was like 7. And my dad actually told me this recently. He was like, I just was like, he kind of knew that was happening. He was like, he just trusted that like my dad's intentions were good. So he's just like, you'll see that like as he gets older. And I think I think my dad was pretty fucked for like 2 or 3 years. Not in to do with like breaking up from my mum. Probably just like, I was his main thing, do you know what I mean? I was his only kid. So she would do stuff, and then when I get angry or annoyed, I'd be like, you're just like your dad, or you're too sensitive. So I remember last year, every time I went to see my mum recently, like the last year, she would say stuff to me like, I'm so sorry for your childhood, I didn't know how to love you and all that. This is also why it's so bad. I'm like, okay, where do you want this conversation to go? You just told me you didn't know how to love me when I was a kid. What do you want me to say to that? Now I'm 28. Like, and she would just start crying. I'm like, right, but you're still sort of the same. And she's like friendly and all this. So like she has mannerisms that can like, if you met her, you wouldn't think any, like, do you know what I mean? Like, she's friendly. And then also then I start falling into like, I feel bad for her again. But it would always be that rhetoric. Like, that's the word she used to me. I was like, I don't want to hear that. She went like, you always were a bit sensitive. And I fucking was like, it was like clicked to me again. I was like, why is that so triggering? And I'm like, because that's what she always done to me. Do you know what I mean? I was like, it clicked again. I was like, fuck, that's what she always done to me. And because I didn't remember all my childhood, I found it so triggering. And I find just being a mum, I find it so triggering. And part of me is like, oh, it'd be nice to go up and see her in it. But it's not. It never is. As in, I don't want to have a good relationship. I feel societal pressure to have a good relationship with my mum, or to try have one. But honestly, like, Paul even asked me, he's like, do you think is that what you want, a relationship with your mum? And I was like, I wouldn't describe, I've never said that I love my mum. As in, I've said it to her, but I've never felt that. And or like, at least since I've been 9, 10 onwards. And also, I don't ever think it's possible to have a good relationship with her. I don't think it's possible. You could have a dinner with her and she might go 3 hours without like saying something like that, or she might not be an arsehole to waiters because she does that every now and then. But I don't think it's possible. Just one more thing before we sort of finish. I got close to her after my first breakup, and then she had another like psychosis episode where she told me that I was telling everyone I was going to kill myself, which I hadn't done. And it was she was so sound to me for like 3 or 4 weeks whilst I was literally fucked, like beyond fucked, and it was the most time I'd ever spent where I didn't want to keep burdening my dad with it, and because my mum had been through a lot of mental health issues, she was being dead supportive and all this. So I was like, I remember one of the last things I said to my first girlfriend was like, because she'd phoned me after 3 days and I was like, can you not contact me? Like, let's just leave this. I need to go over this and fix myself. And I remember going, at least one positive is I spent a lot of time with my mum, and she was like, oh, that's nice, because you don't have that. And then about a month after, I went down to London and went out with my best mate, and it was the first time I'd like done it, and I wasn't drinking or anything after I broke up, and I had a good night out. It was the first time I'd maybe took my mind off it for a bit, and like my mum was asking how I am. I was like, yeah, I had a great night out with Jamie, having a laugh, and like maybe it came across as if I was a bit better. I was still fucked, but then boom, that happened, and she started telling me, why are you telling people you're going to kill yourself? Sent me all these wild amount of messages. Some of it looked psychosis-y, and then some of it just looked like she didn't want me to be any better. And then when I came back, I went to meet her for lunch, and I was like, what was all that about? And I was like, what the fuck was that? And she was like, don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, you know, that absolutely fucked me. And she was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, you're not sorry for that? And she was like, don't know what you're talking about. And I had to walk out of her and Hamilton Nando's, which is where I went to school, and I'm pretty sure there was someone from school there, and I walked out of there crying. So yeah, that's the most brutal part. Done, right? So that's the relationship with my mum. And that's why it's been so brutal. I think this is going to be a really long podcast. I'm sorry if I ramble a lot. It's hard to really remember stuff, and then sometimes I'm just like, I don't want to fucking cry. So, and also I'm like, oh, fuck if you upload that and then fucking people, do you know what I mean? People will watch it. Like, people I know will definitely watch this. But like, I'm at the age now where I think the older you get, the more you're sort of fine with people seeing this and knowing this. And I actually think it's like someone that I don't know from school will probably message me going, here, that like fair playing or really helped me or whatever. One more thing just on this section, actually. This was the hardest part of therapy. Paul really pushed back on me one time because I kept on, everything I just mentioned, I kept on lacing this or prefacing it with, yeah, but she struggled really badly with her mental health, so I don't know if she meant it. And he would be like, would you do that to someone? And I would be like, no. And I was like, have you ever done anything like that in any of your relationships? And I was like, no, I would never ever dream of treating anyone that I care about like that. And he was like, well, why do you defend it? And then I broke down. Like, that was the worst one. Because it got me to, after the research I'd done on it as well, it's like, no, she's not got MPD. A lot of people are like, oh, my girlfriend's, or my ex is a narcissist, or my mom's a narcissist. They're probably not. If you look up the symptoms of it, there's like I think there was like 7 criteria and he hit like 4 or whatever. I looked at it, I was like, my mum maybe hit 2. She definitely doesn't have narcissistic personality disorder, narcissistic tendencies. But man, if you go read that, I probably have one of them. Like they're quite vague, and like we all have narcissistic tendencies. So when people are like, "My ex is a narcissist," shut up. That probably tells you more about yourself. But I had to look up all of these things, and like then it was like the symptoms of someone that's had a narcissistic mother. I was like, I fell into all of them pretty much. I was like, oh, they might work in some sort of like coaching role, helping other people, and I was like, personal trainer, fucking making podcasts, try to help people. So yeah, all of that. Then I spent, honestly, this was like 4 months ago. For the full of March, I had like brain fog. I had quite low mood. I spent about 3 or 4 days after that session crying, like all the time. My flatmates knew I was going for therapy, so I think they sort of like, I'd cried in front of them. I didn't give a fuck, because sometimes it just happened when you were like, if they asked you about it, I wasn't telling them about all my problems all the time, and I don't really feel like I had problems. I had something to address. And then I remember I went on. I spoke about this in the last on the podcast with Anna that I keep talking about, where 2 males talk about therapy. So I won't go into that. But I had a date the day after that session with a girl who, she was the only one that I went on like 4 or 5 dates with. And like the full time I was talking to her, I was like, I'm fucked. Like, not fucked as in like all the issues I was talking about, as in like trust issues and all that. I was like, but my mood was so low, and I was just like, I'm not going to come across well. And I was just overthinking stuff. Again, completely different to that. I was just like, I should have just cancelled. I was too fucked from that session. It was like, all my energy was drained. And like all in March, I couldn't really make like personal training content. I was like fine with all my clients and stuff, but I had to take a big step back from work. And also I actually just sat in with the feelings. Like I didn't try, because I can easily just work through stuff like that. Like, as in just be like, right, I'm going to drill into work and not feel any of this. But I just sat and felt all of it. And it was kind of like grieving. The way I would describe it was like grieving for your childhood. Because I was like, when I used to go to other people's houses and stuff for Christmas, I would if it was a family, even like grandparents and that, or like they had a mum and dad that loved each other, I would just be like, this is so weird. Like, so strange. Before we go on to the next one, I'll just tell you 2 things that'll maybe just sum up. I know this has been too long, this bit, but just because I forgot about Christmas, my mum always used to get me the worst Christmas presents of all time. She's also still got, like, again, it wasn't the worst childhood of all time. I would say I was happy out with the house, loads of friends, really outgoing. I was quite like whatever. So wasn't bad out with the house, and she wasn't horrific to me all the time. And I did get good Christmas presents. If I asked for something, I got an Xbox 360 once. Do you know what I mean? When I asked for it, so like, wasn't all bad. She wasn't horrendous. She's not an absolutely evil person, but just some things don't make sense. One year she got me, her and my auntie got me a Barry Ferguson book. So Barry Ferguson was the captain of Rangers. If anyone knows who Scott Brown is, equivalent to him probably, that played for Rangers. If you're not Scottish, basically Celtic and Rangers, right? It's the biggest rivalry. If you're Scottish, you're like, why are you telling me this? You know. Anyway, I was the biggest Celtic fan ever. She's bought me the captain from the other team's autobiography. Not just that, man, he is from the most Protestant area in Scotland called Lark Hall. So he used to drink in her coffee shop. So she went out, she got it signed by him. I'm a Celtic fan. I'm the biggest Celtic fan there is. And they got me the captain's book signed by him for his autobiography signed to me. So that Christmas was absolutely ruined. My dad had to come up and get me, and I was down at the pitches in Straven kicking a ball about by myself, crying because I was like, why have you bought me that? Then when I was like 22, my mum got me a healing rock for Christmas. That was my only present when I was 22. Like, my only present. A healing rock. Like a big pink healing rock like this size. And she spent 3 weeks asking me. She got it sent to my house. And then she was like, you're going to love your present. You're going to love this present. And then on Christmas Day, I woke up. I had to undo like 5 boxes. And then I just got this big healing rock out. And I was like, the fuck is that? And she was like, oh, I knew you'd love your present. I was like, oh, did you? Aye. Good stuff. Yeah, and I just felt like she didn't know me at all. And that last thing, she used to always, if I said I didn't want to do something, so therapy or meditate, she always tried to get me to meditate, or she would always like be telling me about conspiracy theories. If I asked her to stop doing something, it made her do it more. So if I asked her to not ask me to meditate, which she used to do every day, she would then wait an hour and come in and be like, you would get rid of your anger issues if you meditated. Or she'd be like, why don't you believe me with these conspiracy theories? And then I'd say, can you just not tell me about them? She'd continue to tell me about them. There was like, I would try, like, I didn't know I was setting a boundary. Probably that's what I was trying to do. And it just, she wouldn't let it happen. So yeah, that's finished. That one's finished. Done. I know it was long, but fuck it. That's the biggest part of why I went to therapy. So obviously that was going to be the biggest section. I just felt like that was far too long. I don't know if it was. Maybe you're interested in it. Maybe you're not, but I was long, man. Sorry. So the last session, right? So went through the relationship, my mum, my breakups, that sort of thing. And the last session, I was back in Glasgow, and me and Paul done an in-person session, and it was so much better because he can see my body language, I can see him, and I came a long way. He also was like, mate, I can't ask any more of you, because I did a bit like this podcast. I was fucking like, this is what it is, and like, if you ask me to do an exercise or go away and research like the narcissistic stuff, or like children of a narcissistic parent, I went away and done it. She was like, I can't ask any more of you. But he was like, right, this is the sort of last exercise that we'll do. And it was like a longer session. It was like 2 hours. And the good thing about it being with Paul, and especially in person, like 10 minutes, me and him can just have a bit of a laugh. Do you know what I mean? And like, he's into it, and then he's like, right, let's talk about this. So what he got me to do, so it was kind of like, you're still kind of talking about the same stuff. So it's like trust issues, try to be more vulnerable with people, because I'd felt like I couldn't be vulnerable with people because I didn't trust them. All sort of like feeds into the same thing. But anyway, he wanted to go through all of them again, then go through how to positively reframe them again, and then just to emphasise all of the good things that have happened, because I've grown a lot since like 20 to now. I suppose everyone has, but I really think I couldn't be happier with like me as a person, or as in like what I've achieved and shit. Not that I've achieved loads, as in just like I'm quite happy with myself, who I am as a person, right? And that was all of the stuff that's the trust issues and stuff. Those things have probably helped me do that, like tunnel vision to get to a place, and I'm not just covering up everything. Well, maybe I am in a way, but do you know what I mean? I feel like I'm in a good place. So done that. Then he basically sat face to face with me, and he was like, now I'm going to pretend to be you, and I want you to argue with yourself about why you need to like be more vulnerable and put yourself in more vulnerable situations, right? So took about 5 minutes, and I was like, right, okay, let's do it. And he was like, I was like, remember, I'm not an actor. And he was like, it's fine. He was like, you do skits and that on Instagram. It was like, you can do it. And I was like, okay. I'm probably the man for this job, if anything, and I'll try not take the piss. So like, I'm arguing against him, and I can't remember how this goes, but he's maybe going like that. But what if the same thing happens? So he's just trying to get me to keep arguing against him, by the way. So like, I potentially wouldn't have said what he's going to say, but he's trying to just like get me to argue with myself. So he's like, what if you get burned when you go into a relationship? And I would maybe say some things like, I know how to get over that, and I feel like I wouldn't get into those same situations because I know what the mistakes I've made in the past were. And then he's like, but what about women? Like, I just don't trust someone with my vulnerabilities, like, deeper down the line. And I was like, but I do. Like, I actually think I do. And I actually think if I've been in that situation now, I'll be fine. And like, I've not had that like anxiety flow down me anymore. And if I did, it would never be as bad, and I would be able to deal with it. And then he was like, but what about the fact I just can't trust anyone that way? Like, I don't really trust anyone. And I was like, but I really trust my dad. I was like, my dad will do anything for me. Like, he'd put his life on the line for me. Like, I trust my dad with everything. I hadn't thought about that before. I was like, my dad's never done anything bad to me. In fact, my dad has protected me my full life, and he's done whenever my mum's been there, he's been fucking the man saying sense and making me see sense the full time. And then there was a few back and forths like that, and he was like, right, how do you feel that went? And I was like, yeah, I feel fucking ready, mate. I feel ready. Get me on Tinder. Get on. I was like, yeah, like, there was a few times during the full thing where it was like a weight would just get lifted off your head, or like you would have epiphany moments, and it's not more epiphany moments that you're just like, you don't have that trauma anymore. It's more just like, oh, that's why I got stuck in that fault loop pattern, or that's why that happened, and I now can see that before it happens. Do you know what I mean? Or I can see a situation that's happening. You know the way people keep getting into toxic relationships? You can kind of go, oh, or like someone gets fucking obsessed with you really early on, and you're like, oh, they love me, and then you go, ooh, I usually dive head first into that. Fucking, that's I think they call it trauma bonding, innit? I'm like, shit, fuck, I would have fell for that, you know. And not so much that, like, you know what I mean? It's not so much red flags in another person, but it's more like, I probably need to get in something. If I'm going to get in and like the full time, by the way, I'm not like, I want to get in a relationship now. It's more like, if I want to have kids in my 30s, 28, man, I probably need a relationship first. And it's just like, I want to even just know that I'm capable of doing it. If I ever feel like someone is like, do you know what I mean? If I feel like it's something that I would want, I want to know that my head is in the best place it can be for me to make it work. So I was like, I feel like I'm there. I don't feel like I'm going to be in a relationship in 3 months' time. But I feel like if something came up where I wanted to, I feel like I have the tools. And he was like, cool, now what's the plan going forward? And he like wrote out a big list of like how I want to be going forward, like to actually put this stuff in action and like keep dating, don't avoid it. And like I was getting to the point, I hadn't really told Paul through this, but I went on quite a lot of dates in Australia before, but I was actually doing it as like, I was exposing myself to dating more again, just to sort of like go out and not give a fuck what was going on. So I went on a lot where like me and them never spoke to each other after. I went on ones where I might not have been that interested in the person just to get into the habit of dating, which sounds quite harsh, but this is fucking dating. And if anything, I went, not to defend myself, but I've been going for therapy. Most people don't. and end up in toxic relationships, blame the other person. Like, at least I'm fucking trying to do something, do you know what I mean? So yeah, I was doing all of that, and I was like, yeah, mate, even the dating stuff that I've been doing, like, I feel better doing it. Like, I don't feel like I've not got stupid expectations when I go in as well, that I'm not hoping for it to go well. I'm just like, fuck it, like, it's a date, could go shite, could go well, and my next day isn't really affected on whether it went, even like if it went good, I'm not like thinking about it. I'm like, just, it's like more like baseline level, do you know what I mean? Which is what I always tell people with weight loss and like their relationship with the scale. I'm like, you want not be excited or devastated at what the scale shows you. That's how I know that I'm doing well, because I thought about it like that to myself, and I'm like, yeah, I think I'm there. Yeah, that was sort of like the last session. And I might go for therapy again with someone else, might cover something else, maybe. But yeah, that I felt fucking equipped. Not fixed, but felt, you never really can be fully fixed, you're human. So yeah, I felt fine, I felt good. So my overall experience, now obviously you've listened, some of it was pretty grim, but overall, yeah, you're like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. What I would say is I would have rather done it in person, but the best person that I felt like I knew for the job, I could only do it on Zoom. And what I would like to say is, he's not going to listen to this, but Paul was a fucking legend. And he was an absolute legend. And I don't, because he does the podcast producing, I don't know how much he wants to go out. Like, if people inquired with him after this, that's not the aim of this either. I don't think he has the time. I don't know how. I think he does like a hybrid so he's not doing the same job all the time. But honestly, he was unreal. Like, genuinely, because that's such a hard job. I don't think people realise how hard PTing is. Just like, because we're borderline unqualified therapists sometimes, and we're not giving you therapy, like we're not giving you CBT or anything, but we do need to have this. We basically need to acquire the same people skills. That's why like these people putting their clients on gear and all that. It's like, that's not going to help them, mate. What are you doing? Like, you've got to remember, weight gain is like a coping mechanism. So I had a whole new level of appreciation for how he navigated all those conversations. And even though there's not always loads of structure to it, because sometimes we'd be like going in, he's maybe got an eye, and he's got that many things going on. He's like looking at notes from the previous session. Yeah, I think you as well, right? Don't expect your therapist to remember everything you spoke about in the last session, because that's so raw to you. But like PT sessions, right? I don't remember, man. When I was working in face-to-face, I would write stuff down, right? But see if like you were sick the week before, you got 30 face-to-face clients, you can't or not 30, so you're doing 30 hours, you can't remember that. So like you would be looking through notes, maybe scrambling, going, oh yeah, that's what we're talking about last week. Oh, we said we would do this week. And then I would maybe say something, and he would go, what did you just say? And I'd be like, oh yeah, I don't think that's that big a deal about my second ex that I never really was in love with. And he went, what? I was like, yeah, I wasn't really in love with her. And he was like, okay, tell me more about that. And then we go into that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't really that structured. So yeah, I would just like to say he was unreal. Absolute gem of a guy. And if I think that's what, if I got someone I didn't relate to, or they weren't a people person, I think that's half the battle, then it wouldn't have been as good. I do feel as well, one of the biggest things I've took away, so I've always fought against the idea of maybe like saying stuff like this on podcasts, because it's really personal, it's too much. But like, this has probably been the biggest win for me. So I've now been back from Australia for a month, and I haven't went and seen my mum since I came back. And although I've went periods of not seeing my mum for like 4 to 6 weeks, because I would just like be like, she would ask me to come up, I'd be like, nah. And then I'd eventually go up, maybe like once every 2 months or once every 6 weeks. But this is the first time I've like not felt, I still feel guilt for that, but this is the first time that it's not been overwhelming, the guilt that I've felt. And she was messaging me, and she's asked me, she's not asked me to come up, but she's asked me to go other stuff and that. She asked me again to go see my gran. Like, are you high? Are you actually high? But I said to her that I was going through therapy and I didn't really want to go up. And I told her my relationship with her stresses me out. That was like because I think a lot of people maybe go to therapy because, and I'm saying a lot of people not in a judgment way. I'm saying it in the sense that this was my like urge. I had an urge to like, do you know what I mean? Say something like, because you can start resenting people, and I don't resent her. Even though, like, do you know what? Like, it can come across that it's just full on resentment, but it's more if I keep opening myself up to that, that's just gonna be with me for the rest of my life. Me just continually like being like looking at that and looking at my trauma in the face and just still getting it coming at me. Exposing yourself to that will also, I feel like when I went up to see my mum, I'd be stressed for 3 days before it, and then something might happen when we're there that would make me, for the next 2 days, I could just be walking about and just randomly start crying thinking about something that has maybe happened. Whereas like this month, I've been so mentally fine. Not that I haven't for a good few years, but you do know what I mean? I just feel strong in myself, and I just feel like I don't give a fuck what anyone, like if someone questions it now. One of the first things to my dad I said when I came back was like, I'm not going to see my mum. I might go see her at one point, but do not push me. And he went, fine. And it's the first time he's never not really done it. But I think because of how assured I said it to him, he was like, he knows what he wants. And like, I'm not going to push him. So I think I've just built a new skill where I'm like, go then, tell me why I'm the bad person for not getting to see my mum. And I won't, if you say it to me, it won't faze me. Do you know what I mean? That was my biggest win from it. Honestly, I feel like I've done the right thing, and I feel like I don't care if people think I've not done the right thing. And I also feel like I'm way more equipped for like relationships and stuff. What else did I was going to say something else. I feel like I'm not, it doesn't feel like you're fully fixed. I don't feel like my life has changed either. I already was quite like sort of stoic with some stuff. But it just let me understand everything so much more. And like, I think I'm still susceptible to like maybe mistakes I've made in the past. But I know that I could dive back into therapy if I needed it. Not as like a emergency therapy. Do you know what I mean? I need to stop saying, do you know what I mean? But I just feel like I'm in a way better place. Some weight has been lifted off my head. There's less guilt, less shame. None of it's completely eradicated, but enough for me to go one of the best decisions of my life. I think I've got 3 best decisions, have I? 1, moving to Australia when I was 23. 2, going for therapy. Maybe 3, stopping drinking this year is up there as well. Probably have another one. But yeah. That's it. Sorry because I know that might have been emotional to listen to, especially if you've went, I'm not saying that you're that invested in me that you'll find that emotional, but I know that when this all stemmed from me getting triggered from listening to someone else talk about similar things and it bringing up flashbacks for me. So sorry if it's like, my podcast is usually me and somebody having a fucking laugh, you know, and then I've just went on this rampage with this absolute shit show. But yeah, hope you enjoyed. If anyone has any questions about therapy, don't ask me, like, don't try to get me to help you. I can't help you. But just like, whatever, You know what I mean? If you've got any questions or just like want to DM me about something, I'll try to get back to you. And then before you go, any likes, subscribes on YouTube, you know, any ratings on Spotify, the podcast is out every Tuesday, 7 in the morning. You won't cry. You'll probably laugh on the other ones. And yeah, thank you for listening. That was bloody brutal, mate. Bloody brutal, mate. See you later.